Alex had never imagined that one moment could change everything. He was just an ordinary human, brought into this strange galaxy for a mission he didn't fully understand. But now, standing in front of an alien fortress, everything had shifted. The cold, metallic walls loomed before him as a quiet tension filled the air. Inside, a prisoner awaited, a princess, chained and helpless. His orders were clear: rescue her. But as Alex peered into the dark depths of the prison, he felt something he hadn't expected. Fear. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a man who had been caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But something about this princess, something about this mission, stirred something deep within him. Was this just a simple rescue, or was there more to it? Inside the prison, Zorathra sat in silence, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She was no ordinary prisoner. She was an alien princess, a powerful warrior in her own right, yet she had been enslaved by the ruthless empire that had overthrown her family. Her once proud kingdom had been crushed, and now she was a captive in chains, her destiny stolen. She had lost everything. But Zorathra wasn't one to accept defeat easily. Her spirit burned with the fire of revenge, and the idea of freedom still flickered in her heart. Every day, she had waited, watching for the right moment, the right person to come along and change her fate. Little did she know, that person was about to arrive. Alex didn't know what to expect when he stepped inside the prison, but he certainly hadn't expected the woman he saw in front of him. She was beautiful, strong, and filled with a fierce determination, even in her shackles. Zorathra's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. There was something about her gaze, a force that pulled Alex in. "Are you here to free me?" she asked in a voice that was both commanding and desperate. Alex's heart raced. He had never expected to meet someone like her. Someone so powerful, yet so vulnerable. His task seemed impossible, but in that moment, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't walk away. He had to help her. And so, the journey to change their destinies began. The moment Alex broke the chains binding Zorathra's wrists, the sound of clinking metal echoed through the dark, cold cell. Zorathra stood tall, her eyes glinting with both surprise and a fierce sense of gratitude. She flexed her fingers, the chains no longer weighing her down, but her expression didn't soften. She was a queen, a warrior, and now, a fugitive. She knew that freedom came with a price. "Thank you," she whispered, though her voice was heavy with the weight of her past. "But this is only the beginning." Alex had only just freed her, yet it felt like they were already in over their heads. The prison was just one part of the Empire's grip on her world. Zorathra's capture had been part of a grand plan, and her escape was bound to send shockwaves across the galaxy. "Why were you captured in the first place?" Alex asked as they cautiously made their way through the prison's labyrinth of corridors. Zorathra's pace didn't falter as she glanced over at him. "Because I refused to submit. Because I refused to kneel to a false empire," she said, her words sharp and full of conviction. "They thought breaking me would break my people. But they were wrong." Her story was one of loss and struggle. Zorathra had once ruled a vast, thriving kingdom, filled with people who worshipped her strength and wisdom. But when the Tormax Empire had invaded her homeworld, they came not only to conquer, but to destroy everything she stood for. Her parents, the royal family, were killed in battle, and Zorathra herself had been taken prisoner, treated like a mere object of war, a symbol to break the spirits of her people. "I never wanted to be a prisoner. I was supposed to lead my people, fight for them," she murmured, her gaze distant, filled with memories of a time before the war. Alex could see the burden she carried. She wasn't just fighting for her own freedom. She was fighting for the future of her people, her entire civilization. And now, she had a choice. She could run and hide, or she could fight back. Alex didn't know her plans, but he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her now. There was something in her, something stronger than any enemy they would face. The escape didn't go unnoticed. They reached the exit, But as the door slid open, the sound of heavy boots echoed down the hall. "We've got company," Alex said, his voice tense as the first wave of guards appeared at the end of the corridor. Zorathra's eyes narrowed. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. "Get ready." She was a trained warrior, even though she had spent years as a prisoner. Her body moved with precision and grace, a fluid dance of defense and counterattack. As the first guard lunged at them, she grabbed his weapon, twisted it from his hands, and incapacitated him in a matter of seconds. The guards didn't stand a chance. But as they fought their way toward freedom, a chilling realization settled over Alex. This wasn't just an escape from a prison. It was the beginning of a larger war. The Tormax wouldn't stop until Zorathra was dead. They wouldn't stop until they had crushed everything she loved. "Let's move," Zorathra said, her voice commanding as she led the way down a hidden hallway. "We have to leave this place before the entire Empire descends on us." Alex followed closely behind, his heart pounding in his chest. The fight was far from over, but with Zorathra at his side, he felt a surge of hope. She was more than just a princess in chains. She was a symbol of resistance. She was a fire that could ignite an entire galaxy. And Alex, he was ready to help her burn everything down. The air outside the prison was thick with tension. Every step they took felt like it was leading them straight into danger. Alex could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. What had started as a simple mission to free a princess was now a full-blown escape, and he wasn't sure he was ready for what came next. He was no soldier, no hero. He was just a man caught in the middle of something far bigger than himself. But Zorathra, she was the key to everything. Zorathra glanced at him, her golden eyes sharp and calculating. "We have to move quickly. The Tormax Empire won't let us get far." Her words were laced with urgency, but there was something else there, too. Something Alex couldn't quite place. A quiet confidence, as though she already knew the odds they were facing but wasn't willing to back down. Alex swallowed hard, trying to shake the knot of fear forming in his stomach. "I didn't sign up for this," he muttered, mostly to himself. Zorathra stopped in her tracks, turning to face him. "None of us do," she said quietly. "But now that you're here, you don't get to walk away." Her voice held no malice, only truth. There was no going back. Alex was in this now, whether he liked it or not. He had freed her, and that made him a part of this war, a part of her mission. But as they continued through the dense alien forest, Alex couldn't help but feel that this wasn't just about freeing her anymore. This was about stopping the empire that had crushed everything she loved. And maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. Despite the fear gnawing at him, Alex felt a flicker of something deep inside. A sense of purpose, of belonging. Zorathra's fight had become his fight. She had already lived through so much, and now, it was his turn to stand beside her. As they trekked deeper into the jungle, Alex tried to process everything he had learned so far. Zorathra had been a princess, a ruler. Now she was a fugitive, and her world was falling apart. But she wasn't just any princess. She was a warrior, a force to be reckoned with, and her enemies feared her. The Tormax Empire had underestimated her, and that was a mistake they would soon regret. Zorathra turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "You should know," she said, "the Tormax are ruthless. They don't care about who you are. They'll destroy anyone who stands in their way." Alex nodded grimly. He had seen the fear in her eyes when they first met, the weight of her captivity. But now, there was something different about her, something fierce, unstoppable. "And they'll come after us." "I know that," Alex said, his voice steadying as the realization set in. "But we can't run forever. We have to fight back." Zorathra gave him a sharp, approving glance. "Good. That's what I like to hear." But even as the words left her mouth, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into a trap. The closer they got to the rebel base, the more exposed they became. They were out in the open, vulnerable to every enemy who could be watching from the shadows. But Zorathar's eyes never wavered. She was focused, driven by the need to reclaim her throne and restore balance to her people. "Tell me more about this rebel base," Alex said, trying to keep his mind off the danger closing in on them. Zorathar's gaze softened for a moment, a hint of nostalgia in her eyes. "It's our last stronghold, a place where my people can regroup, gather strength, and prepare for the war ahead. But it's also dangerous. The Tormax have spies everywhere, and if they find out where we're going, it'll be over." Alex's heart raced as he thought about the implications. They were walking straight into enemy territory, but it was the only place where they could find refuge. "Then we'll need to be careful," Alex said, his voice low but firm. "We can't afford to be caught. Not now." Zorathra nodded, her eyes filled with resolve. "You're starting to understand, Alex. But remember, it's not just about survival. It's about fighting for something greater. The galaxy won't be free until the Tormax are defeated." Alex swallowed, his mind racing. He had always thought of himself as an ordinary guy. But now, standing at the edge of a battle that could shape the future of an entire galaxy, he didn't feel so ordinary anymore. His path had been altered the moment he freed Zorathra. As they moved forward, deeper into the alien jungle, Alex made a vow to himself. He wouldn't just run from this fight. He would stand beside Zorathra, no matter the cost, because the fate of an entire galaxy rested on their shoulders. And now, Alex was ready to fight for it. The deeper Alex and Zorathra ventured into the alien jungle, the more the weight of their journey settled on his shoulders. The air was thick with the smell of alien flora, and the ground beneath their feet was soft, squishy, almost like walking on a living thing. Alex kept his eyes sharp, scanning the surroundings, constantly alert. He couldn't afford to relax, not with the Tormax Empire hunting them down. "How much farther?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The tension in the air was suffocating. Zorathar's gaze never wavered from the path ahead. "Not far now. We're close to the base," she replied. "But we'll have to go through a canyon to reach it. It's a natural defense, but it's also a trap if the enemy knows about it." Alex nodded, understanding the risks. The canyon might offer them protection from surveillance, but if the Tormax knew their route, they'd be walking straight into an ambush. As they approached the canyon's edge, Alex felt a strange unease wash over him. The towering cliffs on either side seemed to close in, creating a narrow path that led straight into the heart of the base. There were no signs of life, nothing that indicated it was a haven, a place of refuge. The stillness felt off. Zorathra sensed it too. "They've been here," Zorathra muttered, her voice tense. "The Tormax have been watching us." Alex felt his stomach churn. "What do we do now?" he asked, his hand instinctively resting on the weapon at his side. Zorathra paused, her eyes scanning the path ahead. She was thinking. "We have two choices," she said, her voice cold and calculating. "We can keep going and hope we reach the base before they do, or we can set a trap of our own. But that will only buy us a few hours, maybe a day at most." Alex's mind raced as he weighed the options. If they kept moving forward, they could reach the base, but there was no guarantee it would be safe. If they set a trap, they could slow the Tormax down, but there was no telling how far ahead the enemy was. "We don't have time," Alex said, his voice firm. "We keep moving. If the base is really close, we'll make it before they can catch up." Zorathra nodded, her face hardening. "You're right. Let's move." They pressed forward, each step taking them closer to the canyon's opening. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. The path was narrow, and the canyon walls seemed to press in on them, almost suffocating. Every shadow, every rustle of the wind, made Alex jump, his senses on high alert. Suddenly, Zorathra halted. Her body tensed, and her eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of movement. "Something's not right," she muttered. Before Alex could ask what she meant, the air seemed to crackle with tension. A sharp, high-pitched whine filled the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of blaster fire. Alex ducked instinctively, pulling Zorethra down with him. "Get to cover," Zorethra shouted, her voice commanding. They dove behind a large boulder, the crackle of energy blasts slamming into the ground around them. Alex's heart raced. The Tormax had found them. The hunt was on. Zorethra peeked over the rock, her eyes narrowing as she identified the enemy soldiers approaching. "There are too many of them," she said quietly. "We need to get out of here. Fast." Alex felt a surge of panic, but he pushed it down. He had to think clearly. "We can't outrun them," he said, his mind working in overdrive. "But maybe we can fight back. Give them a reason to hesitate." Zorethra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "What do you have in mind?" "Distraction," Alex said quickly. "I'll create a diversion. You take out the first wave of soldiers. We can hold them off long enough to get to the base." Zorethra's gaze hardened with approval. "I like it. But remember, if you fail, we both die." Alex didn't flinch. He was used to being outnumbered. He had to make this work. "I'll make it work," he said, gripping the blaster tighter in his hand. He crawled slowly, staying low behind the rocks. The Tormax soldiers were too focused on their advance to notice him yet. He had only one shot at this. Alex reached into his pack and pulled out a small explosive device, something Zorethra had given him for situations like this. It was designed to create a massive distraction, just enough to disorient the enemy. He activated the device and tossed it into the canyon behind the soldiers, making sure it landed far enough to cause maximum chaos. The blast was deafening, sending a shockwave through the air. Dust and rocks exploded into the air, and the soldiers' formation broke apart in confusion. "Now," Zorethra shouted. Alex rushed forward, blaster in hand, and opened fire. Zorethra was already in motion, her weapon flashing as she took down the first wave of soldiers with deadly precision. The Tormax soldiers scattered, trying to regroup, but Alex and Zorethra were already moving, slipping through the chaos. The canyon was a dangerous place to fight, but it also gave them the advantage. The Tormax weren't used to guerrilla tactics. They weren't used to being hunted. "We're almost there," Zorethra called, her voice laced with determination. "Stay focused." Alex nodded, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The rebel stronghold was just ahead. It was their only hope. After what felt like hours of fighting, the two of them finally reached the entrance of the rebel base, a massive, camouflaged bunker hidden beneath the roots of ancient alien trees. The moment Alex stepped through the door, the weight of what they had just survived crashed down on him. His body was sore, his mind exhausted, but there was no time to rest. They were far from safe, and they both knew it. "Welcome to the heart of the resistance," Zorethra said, her voice low but filled with a strange sense of pride. The underground base was bustling with activity. Soldiers and engineers moved quickly, preparing weapons and communication equipment. The air was thick with the scent of burnt fuel, metal, and something sweet, like the smell of alien flowers mixed with the dust of long-forgotten wars. Alex's mind spun as he tried to take it all in. This place was unlike anything he had ever seen, an entire network of rebels dedicated to toppling the Tormax Empire. And now, he was part of it. Zorethra led him deeper into the heart of the base, passing through a series of tightly secured doors that only she seemed to have clearance for. Finally, they reached a command room, where a group of soldiers and a few high-ranking officials were gathered around a large holographic map. At the center of the table stood a tall, broad-shouldered man with a battle-worn face. His eyes locked onto Zorethra's as she entered. "Your Majesty," the man said, giving a quick, respectful nod. "We've been expecting you." Zorethra didn't acknowledge the title. "I'm not here for formalities," she said, her voice cold. "The Tormax know we've escaped. We don't have much time." The man, who Alex now assumed was the leader of the rebels, looked at the map before them. The Tormacs are spread thin, but they fortified their positions on all major fronts. We have little room to maneuver. How much time do we have before they attack? Zorethra's expression was grim. Not much. They'll send a fleet to track us down. We have to strike first. We need to gather our forces, and we need to do it fast. Alex had no idea how he fit into all of this, but as he watched the rebel leaders discuss their strategy, something inside him stirred. He wasn't just some outsider anymore. He had a stake in this fight, just like Zorethra. Zorethra turned to him then, her golden eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. "We'll need your help, Alex. We need to plan a counterattack, and your knowledge of their tactics could make all the difference." Alex blinked, not expecting the sudden responsibility. "Me? I don't know how to fight wars. I just freed you." Her lips curled into a small, approving smile. "You've already shown me what you're made of. You're more capable than you think." Alex didn't know if he was ready to become a soldier, but the weight of her words settled deep in his chest. He'd come this far, and there was no going back. He could help them. He had to. The meeting continued, plans laid out in detail as the rebel forces prepared for a fight they knew they couldn't afford to lose. The Tormacs were ruthless, and their reach was vast. Zorethra's resistance was their last hope. "We need to hit their fleet, disrupt their communications, and take out their command base," the leader of the resistance said, pointing at various key locations on the map. "Zorethra, I'll leave the final decision on the strike to you." Zorethra stood tall, her posture commanding, her gaze fixed on the map. "We strike at their weakest point, their communications hub. Without it, they won't be able to coordinate their forces, and we'll have a better chance of overwhelming them." Alex wasn't sure what to make of the plan. It sounded ambitious, but he trusted Zorethra. She had led people before, and she had survived the worst the Tormacs could throw at her. If anyone could pull this off, it was her. "We'll need a team to infiltrate their compound," Zorethra continued, turning to Alex. "I want you to lead it." Alex's heart skipped a beat. What? Lead it? He hadn't even signed up for this kind of thing. Zorethra didn't flinch. "You've earned my trust, Alex. You've proven that you can think under pressure. We need you on the front lines now, not just as a bystander." Alex wanted to argue, to tell her that he wasn't cut out for this, but something about the way she looked at him made him stop. There was no hesitation in her eyes, only the calm certainty of someone who had seen far more than they should have, yet still refused to bow to fear. "All right," he said, his voice firm. "I'll do it." Zorethra's expression softened, just for a moment, before she turned back to the command table. "Good. We move out at first light." The rebel leaders nodded, and Alex felt the weight of their gazes on him. He had a role to play now. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for a future. For Zorethra's people. For the galaxy. As the meeting broke up, and the rebels went to prepare for the coming battle, Zorethra stayed behind. She approached Alex and placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip surprisingly strong. "You're not alone in this," she said quietly. "We fight together." Alex looked up at her, a strange warmth spreading in his chest. The fear that had been clawing at him began to fade. This was bigger than him. And maybe, just maybe, he had what it took to help change the galaxy. Together, they would face the Tormacs Empire. Together, they would fight to free the stars. The hours before the mission felt like a blur. Alex barely slept. He spent the night preparing for the most important task of his life, while Zorethra and the rest of the rebel forces sharpened their weapons and double-checked their gear. The air in the base was thick with anticipation as everyone silently understood the stakes. Alex felt the pressure mounting, but he couldn't back down now. Zorethra had put her faith in him. The rebel leaders were counting on him. The survival of countless innocent lives depended on what he would do in the coming hours. As the first light of the alien sun crept into the sky, casting long shadows over the hidden base. Zorathra approached Alex, her expression unreadable as always. Yet there was something in her eyes, something that made him believe in the mission. "You ready?" Zorathra asked, her voice steady, but there was a hint of something else beneath the surface. Concern, or perhaps it was a quiet hope, something Alex hadn't seen before. Alex nodded, tightening the straps on his tactical gear. He had trained with the Resistance in the short time he'd been there, enough to hold his own. But this mission was unlike anything he'd ever done. No more running, no more hiding. This was their chance to strike back. Zorathra placed a hand on his arm, her gaze unwavering. "If we succeed, it'll change everything. This is for all of us." He met her gaze. "I won't let you down." They walked together toward the transport ships, where the rest of the rebel team awaited. The convoy was small but efficient, a tight-knit group of elite soldiers who knew their purpose. Everyone knew the plan. The goal was simple: infiltrate the Tormax Empire's communication hub, destroy their infrastructure, and cripple their ability to coordinate their forces. But there was a catch. The Tormax weren't stupid. They'd expect a strike, and their defenses would be prepared. They had a small window of time to move, and once that window closed, they'd be facing an overwhelming counterattack. The rebels had no idea how many Tormax forces were waiting, but they knew this was their only shot. As the shuttle doors closed, sealing them in the belly of the ship, the group exchanged quick glances. It was now or never. The engines hummed to life, and with a sudden jolt, the shuttle launched into the sky. Outside, the landscape blurred as they ascended into space. Zorathra sat beside Alex, her fingers tracing over the maps and coordinates displayed on the console. The tension was palpable, but she remained focused, as always. Alex couldn't help but wonder how she stayed so calm, so composed. He didn't have that luxury. The mission was beginning to feel real. As they traveled closer to the Tormax facility, Alex found himself battling his nerves. This was the enemy, the Tormax Empire, the forces that had held Zorathra's people in chains, the ones who had tried to destroy her, tried to destroy everything she cared about. He clenched his fists. This wasn't just a mission to him anymore. It was personal. Minutes felt like hours as they approached the massive, heavily fortified Tormax communication hub. It was an imposing structure, made of blackened steel and fortified with layers of energy shields. "We'll land just outside the perimeter," Zorathra spoke, her voice cutting through the hum of the ship. "From there, we'll move in quickly and hit their main control center." Alex nodded, trying to calm his racing heart. "How many people are inside?" "Enough to make things difficult," she said grimly. "But if we're quick and precise, we can catch them off guard. We have the element of surprise." The shuttle descended, the landscape below becoming clearer. An industrial wasteland surrounded by high walls, guard towers, and patrolling drones. Alex could see the complexity of the enemy's defenses even from this distance. The shuttle touched down with a soft thud, the landing gear making a faint hiss as the pressure equalized. The doors slid open, revealing the dark, hostile world outside. The rebel soldiers quickly filed out, moving in synchronized formation. Alex felt the weight of Zorathra's hand on his shoulder once again. "You're with me. Stick to the plan, and we'll make it through." As they stepped out into the shadows of the Tormax compound, the sounds of distant engines and clanking metal echoed through the air. It was eerily quiet, but Alex knew better than to trust that silence. The rebel team moved swiftly through the industrial complex, staying out of sight, blending into the darkness as they navigated toward their target. The drones above moved in a constant patrol pattern, their scanning beams flickering across the ground. Alex held his breath as they passed beneath one, praying they wouldn't be detected. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the control center. The towering structure loomed in front of them, guarded by heavily armed Tormax soldiers. The rebels split into smaller teams, each taking positions around the perimeter, preparing for the assault. Zorithra looked at Alex one last time. "This is it," she said quietly. Alex's heart raced, but there was no turning back now. He gave a quick nod, tightening his grip on the blaster. He could feel the weight of their mission pressing on him. This was his moment. Zorithra signaled to the team, and the assault began. Blaster fire erupted from every direction as the rebels stormed the building, pushing forward with lethal precision. Alex was right there with them, his shots hitting their targets with deadly accuracy. He had no time to think, only to act. The soldiers inside the compound reacted swiftly, but they were no match for the rebels' speed and surprise. Explosions rang out as rebel forces planted charges on critical infrastructure. The power was flickering, the lights dimming as the communication systems went down one by one. But then, the enemy reinforcements arrived, just as Alex had feared. The ground shook as the Tormax forces launched a counterattack. The rebels were outnumbered, and the mission was now more dangerous than ever. Zorithra shouted to Alex above the chaos, "We need to finish this now." With the mission hanging by a thread, Alex gritted his teeth. They couldn't fail now. They wouldn't. This was their only chance to cripple the Tormax Empire, and he wasn't about to let that slip away. The fight for the future had begun. The firefight escalated in seconds. The blast of energy weapons, the shrill whine of high-powered lasers slicing through the air. It all felt like a nightmare. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline coursing through his veins as the battlefield erupted into chaos. He moved instinctively, firing his blaster at any Tormax soldier who appeared, taking cover behind shattered metal structures. Zorithra was by his side, her regal presence somehow unshaken by the firestorm. She moved with the precision of a seasoned warrior, cutting through the enemy ranks with her advanced alien weaponry. Alex couldn't help but admire the way she commanded the chaos around them. Her calmness, her strength. She was a natural-born leader. "We're close," Zorithra shouted over the noise, her eyes scanning the area as her team cleared a path. "The control room is just ahead, but we need to clear this hall first." Alex nodded, following her lead as they advanced. Every step felt like an eternity. The Tormax soldiers were well trained, but they were struggling against the rebellion's surprise tactics. The rebels had the element of unpredictability, and that was giving them the upper hand, at least for now. But Alex could see the reinforcements streaming in. More Tormax soldiers were arriving by the second, and the walls of the compound were closing in. This had to end soon, or the Tormax would overwhelm them. "Alex," Zorithra's voice cut through his thoughts as she turned to him. "We need to plant the final charge in the heart of their communication systems. It's the only way to ensure they can't regroup." Alex's breath hitched, and he glanced at the blinking countdown on his wrist. The charge was set to go off in 10 minutes, but he knew it would take everything to get there. The hallway ahead was a minefield of hostile soldiers and their blindingly fast drones. Without waiting for a reply, Zorithra motioned to a few of her best soldiers. "Cover us," she barked. The group moved swiftly, their boots thudding against the metallic floor as they charged down the corridor. Alex followed close behind, his senses heightened, feeling the weight of his mission on his shoulders. His breaths were quick, his mind racing to stay ahead of the danger closing in behind them. As they reached the heavy doors leading into the heart of the Tormax command center, Alex felt the tension in the air, the calm before the storm. Zorithra signaled to the team, and in one swift movement, they breached the doors. The control room was massive. Holographic screens covered every wall, flashing with live data from across the galaxy. Tormax officers scrambled in a panic, attempting to salvage their failing systems. Alex wasted no time, sprinting to the center console where the final charge was set to be placed. He had barely made it there when a familiar voice crackled over the intercom. "Intruders in the command room. All units, move in." It was a Tormax commander, his voice cold and commanding. Alex didn't hesitate. He rushed to the console, his hands moving faster than his thoughts as he worked to position the explosive. His mind was a blur of calculations, But his hands were steady. He couldn't afford to fail. Just as he finished securing the charge, the door burst open behind him. Tormak's soldiers stormed the room, weapons raised. Zorethra immediately turned and fired, her shots precise and lethal, but the enemy was coming in from all sides. "Alex," Zorethra shouted as she ducked behind a console for cover. "Activate the charge now. We don't have time." With his heart pounding in his ears, Alex turned to the blinking red button in front of him. His finger hovered above it, the weight of his decision heavy in his chest. If he pressed it, there would be no going back. The Tormaks would lose their ability to communicate, but the blast would be catastrophic. He couldn't afford to hesitate. Without another second of doubt, he slammed his finger onto the button. The room shook violently as a deafening explosion tore through the heart of the Tormak's base. The lights flickered and then died, leaving them in complete darkness except for the red glow of emergency lights. Alex's ears rang from the blast, but his focus was unwavering. The Tormak soldiers stumbled, disoriented by the blast and the sudden loss of communication. The rebels, however, pushed forward, fighting with renewed energy. The Tormaks were no longer a unified force. They were scattered, vulnerable. It was chaos. Zorethra gave him a brief nod of approval, though her eyes were full of fire. "We're not done yet. Get ready." With the power systems failing, the rebels began their final push. They moved swiftly, clearing the remaining soldiers with a brutal efficiency. Alex could see the panic in the enemy's eyes now. They were realizing that they were losing. And it was all because of the strike that Alex and Zorethra had led. But there was no time to celebrate. The Tormaks were regrouping, calling in for reinforcements from other parts of the base. It was a race against time to escape before the enemy could close in on them. "Let's move out," Zorethra commanded. "Everyone, fall back to the extraction point." Alex didn't need to be told twice. He followed Zorethra and the others as they raced toward the exit, the walls of the Tormak's base shaking as their once secure fortress crumbled around them. The rebel forces had done the impossible. They had crippled the heart of the Tormak's empire. But the real battle was only beginning. As they made their way back to the shuttle, the rebels exchanged weary glances. They had won a major victory today, but the war was far from over. Alex knew the Tormaks would retaliate. But for now, the galaxy had a glimmer of hope, and Alex was ready to fight for it.